Module 10, Monopolistic Competition and Oligopoly. Why it matters, monopolistic competition and oligopoly. Monopolistically competitive markets feature a large number of competing firms, but the products they sell are not identical. The other type of imperfectly competitive market is oligopoly. Oligopolistic markets are those which a small number of firms dominate. Example, commercial aircraft, Boeing and Airbus. Soft drink industry, Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Monopolistic competition is what economists call industries that consist of many firms competing against each other but selling different products. Examples, clothing stores, restaurants, grocery stores. When products are distinctive, each firm has a mini monopoly on its particular style or flavor or brand name. Firms producing such products must also compete with other styles, flavors, and brand names. The term monopolistic competition captures this mixture of mini monopoly and tough competition. Differentiated products. Firms can try to be different in their products from other competitors in several ways. Physical characteristics of the product, i.e. unbreakable bottle, non-stick surface, non-shrink, location of where the product is sold, intangible aspects of the product, i.e. guarantee of satisfaction, money back, perceptions of the product. Products that all have these qualities are called differentiated products. Product differentiation is any action that firms do to make consumers think their products are different from their competitors, i.e. brands. The variety of styles, flavors, locations, and characteristics create product differentiation and monopolistic competition. Perceived demand for a monopolistic competitor. A monopolistically competitive firm perceives a demand for its good that is an intermediate case between monopoly, which is in panel C, and competition, which is in panel A. The downward demand curve as faced by a monopolistic competitor is not flat, but rather downward sloping. This means that the monopolistic competitor can raise its price without losing all of its customers or lower its price. Profit maximization under monopolistic competition. The monopolistically competitive firm decides on its profit maximizing quantity and price in much the same way as a monopolist. It sets marginal revenue equal to marginal cost and finds in this example a quantity of 40. A monopolistic competitor faces a downward sloping demand curve, so it would go up to the demand curve and over to the price at that point to choose its combination of price and quantity. Calculating profits. The same process used for perfect competition and monopoly are used to calculate how much profit a firm is earning. To calculate profits, start from the profit maximizing quantity, find the total revenue, which is price times quantity, find the total cost, which is average total cost times quantity, and that's the area of the rectangle. The difference between the two areas is the profit, and that's the small rectangle above total cost in the figure. Monopolistic competitors and entry. A monopolistic competitor may earn profits in the short run, but that doesn't mean they'll be able to keep them. If one monopolistic competitor starts to do well in a market, other firms will be tempted to enter that market. The entry of other firms into some particular market shifts the demand curve, and therefore also the marginal revenue curve, faced by a monopolistically competitive firm. So this is in panel A. We see that there's a downward or leftward shift of demand and marginal revenue, and the new profit maximizing quantity will be the point at Y, which is where the average total cost curve is tangent to the new lower demand curve. B is the opposite, where there are losses and firms leave, which makes the demand curve and the marginal revenue curve shift to the right, and the new profit maximizing quantity is at point Z, where the average total cost is tangent at that point. Entry, exit, and profits in the long run. As long as the firm is earning positive economic profits, new competitors will continue to enter the market. This reduces the original firm's demand and marginal revenue curves. Monopolistic competitors can make an economic profit or loss in the short run. In the long run, entry and exit will drive firms toward a zero economic profit outcome. The zero economic profit outcome in monopolistic competition looks different from the zero economic profit outcome in perfect competition. Monopolistic competition and efficiency. The long-term result of entry and exit in a perfectly competitive market is that all firms end up selling at a price level that is determined by the lowest point on the average total cost curve. The outcome is the reason why perfect competition shows productive efficiency. Productive efficiency are goods and services being produced at the lowest possible average cost. The end result of entry and exit is that firms end up with a price that lies on the downward sloping demand portion of the average total cost curve, the downward sloping portion of the average cost curve. Monopolistic competition, therefore, will not be as productively efficient. The benefits of variety and product differentiation. Product differentiation is based on variety and innovation. If it weren't for product differentiation, everyone would wear the same clothes, eat the same foods, drive the same car. Economists have struggled to address the question of whether a market-oriented economy produces the optimal amount of variety. Critics think that too much product differentiation, along with advertising and marketing, is socially wasteful. On the other hand, no one forces consumers to buy highly advertised brand names or differentiated products. This controversy may never resolve due to the two sides placing different values on what variety means for consumers. How does advertising impact monopolistic competition? Advertising is all about explaining to people or making people believe that the products a firm is selling are differentiated from the products of another firm. There are two ways to conceive of how advertising works. Advertising causes the perceived demand curve to become steeper. Advertising causes the firm's perceived demand curve to shift to the right. In either case, a successful advertising campaign may allow a firm to sell either a greater quantity or to charge a higher price or both, and thus increase profits. The economics of welfare. It may happen that expenditures on advertisement made by competing monopolists, that is, what we now call monopolistic competitors, will simply neutralize one another and leave the industrial position exactly as it would have been if neither had expended anything. For, clearly, if each of two rivals makes equal efforts to attract the favor of the public away from the other, the total result is the same as it would have been if neither had made any effort at all. Why do oligopolies exist? Oligopolies arise when a small number of large firms have all or most of the sales. Examples of oligopoly abound and include the auto industry, cable TV, and commercial air travel. Oligopolies typically are characterized by mutual interdependence, where various decisions such as output price and advertising are. A combination of the barriers to entry that create monopolies and product differentiation can create the setting for an oligopoly. Product differentiation at the heart of monopolistic competition can also play a role in creating oligopoly. There's no single generally accepted model of oligopoly. There are several that apply in different situations. One can calculate and graph an oligopoly's cost and revenue curves and determine its profit maximizing level of output and price in the same way as a monopoly. What complicates matters with oligopolistic industries is that any one firm's demand and marginal revenue curves are influenced by what the other oligopolistic firms are doing. Example, if Pepsi goes on sale, the demand for Coca-Cola declines. The demand and marginal revenue curves shift to the left. The best price and quantity for any oligopoly depends on what every other firm in the industry is doing. Collusion or competition. When oligopolistic firms consider what quantity to produce and the price, there's a temptation to work with other firms and act as a single monopoly. Working with other firms can help with holding down industry output, charging a higher price, dividing profit among themselves. When firms work together to reduce output and keep prices high, it is called collusion. A group of firms that have a formal agreement to collude to produce the monopoly output and sell at a monopoly price is called a cartel. What collusion looks like. If the firm decides to collude, they choose to produce the monopoly output, QC, and charge a corresponding price, PC, which can be read off the market demand curve. Since they produce together, where MR equals MC, they will maximize industry profits, just like an actual monopoly. Collusion versus cartels, how to differentiate. In the U.S., it is illegal for firms to collude since collusion is anti-competitive behavior which is in violation of antitrust law. The Antitrust Division of the Justice Department and the Federal Trade Commission have a responsibility to prevent collusion in the United States. The problem of enforcement is finding hard evidence of collusion. Cartels are formal agreements to collude, and cartel agreements provide evidence of collusion, so they are very rare in the U.S. Cutthroat competition. When oligopolists recognize the benefit of working as a group by acting like a monopoly, the private temptation to produce a little more and earn more comes into play. Those with this temptation still count on the other oligopolists to hold down their production and keep prices high. If some oligopolists give in to this temptation and start to produce more, the market price will fall. Some oligopoly firms will end up earning zero economic profits. A small handful of oligopoly firms may end up competing so fiercely that they all find themselves earning zero economic profits. This situation is called cutthroat competition. Trade-offs of imperfect competition. Oligopoly is probably the second most common market structure after monopolistic competition. Oligopolies can result from patented innovations or from taking advantage of economies of scale to produce at low average cost. These provide considerable benefits to consumers. Oligopolies are often protected by significant barriers to entry. This enables the oligopolist to earn sustained profits over long periods of time. They typically operate at a level of output where price is greater than marginal cost. So, oligopolistic industries are not allocatively efficient. Game theory. Oligopolies are complex, and there's no accepted theory on how they behave. Instead, economists use game theory, which is a branch of mathematics that analyzes situations in which players must make decisions and then receive payoffs based on what other players decide to do. Game theory has found widespread applications in the social sciences, business, law, and military strategy. A key element of game theory is the concept of Nash equilibrium. No player has an incentive to change their decision, knowing the decision of the other players and assuming other players don't change their mind. Here we have the prisoner's dilemma. It's a scenario in which the gains from cooperation are larger than the rewards from pursuing self-interest. So each box represents what happens for each prisoner if they choose to do one of two things: remain silent or confess. So the way to work out this prisoner's dilemma, here's the wording behind it. Two co-conspiratorial criminals are arrested. When they're taken to the police station, they refuse to say anything and are put in separate interrogation rooms. Eventually, a police officer enters the room where prisoner A is being held and says, "You know what? Your partner in the other room is confessing, so your partner's going to get a light prison sentence of just 1 year. And because you're remaining silent, the judge is going to stick you with 8 years in prison. Why don't you get smart? If you confess too, we'll cut your jail time down to 5 years, and your partner will get 5 years also." Over in the next room, another police officer is giving the exact same speech to prisoner B. What the police officers do not say is that if both prisoners remain silent, the evidence against them is not especially strong, and the prisoners end up with only 2 years in jail. So the bottom line is, if they could collude and both remain silent, they would both only get 2 years, but they each assume it would be better to confess because the other person is confessing, and once they both confess, then they both end up with 5 years in jail. So the Nash equilibrium is the 5 years each, which is worse than if they had colluded. The oligopoly version of prisoner's dilemma. Members of an oligopoly can face a prisoner's dilemma situation. This is a type of game theory game. A two-firm oligopoly is known as a duopoly. Firm A can choose to increase output or hold down output, and same with firm B. So firm A looks at what its options are given what firm B does. If firm B decides to hold down output, firm A can choose to either get 1,000 or get 1,500. So clearly firm A would choose to get 1,500, and chooses to increase output. We could do the same thing with firm B, and firm B would choose, to increase output. It could choose between, if firm A holds down output, B would get 1,000 or it would get 1,500. So in both cases, the firms decide to increase output. And then that leads them to this red box where they each only get 400. That's worse than if they both hold down output and get 1,000. Similar to the prisoner's dilemma: remain silent, do better off, then each confess. Quick review. What are some examples of monopolistically competitive industries? What is the significance of differentiated products to monopolistic competition? What is the difference between demand curves for monopolistically competitive firms, monopolies, and perfectly competitive firms? How does a monopolistic competitor choose price and quantity using marginal revenue and marginal cost? How do you graph and interpret monopolistically competitive firms' average, marginal, and total cost curves? How do you compute total revenue, profits, and losses for monopolistic competitors using the demand and average cost curves? How does short-run and long-run equilibrium affect entry and exit in a monopolistically competitive industry? What are monopolistically competitive markets, and why are they inefficient? What is product differentiation? How does advertising work in monopolistically competitive industries? Why do oligopolies exist and how? What is collusion and cartels? What are profits and losses in an oligopoly, including how to maximize profits, how cutthroat competition can result in zero economic profits. What are oligopolies? Why are they inefficient? What is the role of game theory in understanding the behavior of oligopolies? And that is all.